Hello and welcome back to the Double Swing. This is our fourth and final recording before the RMRs even start. It's the Americas, the final one. I've just realised I put NA in the heading up here rather than Americas. Let's just all pretend we didn't see that. Let's just say that says Americas and move on with our life. Joining us is a not so famous but dear to our hearts. He's a Canadian just for today, because I think a lot of those people with the American flag behind them would feel a little bit iffy about it right now. I don't really understand why, personally. I'm a big fan of spray tan, but that's for them. Why not? Tony, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
No, I'm doing really well. I'm the honorary Canadian for the day. I'm cool with that. I'm down. I'm down to represent all the kinds of Americans as a representative here today on the double swing.
Yeah, perfect. You've chosen to delegate first pick to push it away. You've gone to actually third position in the picking order. Yeah, you've been studying some game theory. I think you've got a few things lined up. And I've ended up with the first pick. So I'm just going to get us started straight away. And of course, I am going to pick Crew. No, of course not. Of course not. I don't even know who plays for Crew.
That's a shame.
Name 3 Crew players.
I've got the list open and I still can't read them. Like, what the hell is... No, I'm going to go with the tried and tested, the team that I think should be the favourite, but aren't according to HLTV's ranking at least. I'm going to take Liquid. I don't really have much to say in their favour. Like, they've been on a bit of a downswing of late, with some Yekindar regression, some Ultimate regression. But realistically, I'm picking this team for the reasons they've been really good and really scary. Twists, NAF as a rifle duo have been really outstanding. JKS has come in and filled the role beautifully that he needed to, and that's allowed them to be a really solid core. Like, their floor is not going to be very low at this event. It's just about, if they face a team with a lot of firepower and Yakindar's taking a lot of opening deaths, Ultimate's taking a lot of dry fights and not hitting his shots, are we going to be a bit scared in the BO1s? Are we going to be a bit iffy? Maybe, but I've full confidence in them being able to come back from an 0-2 to go 3-2 through the BO3s, as well as, realistically, having the firepower to win the BO1s. I'm just saying, if they get close, they could get, a bit of squeaky bum time, but they should be fine. They are the heavy favourite here, and I've got them going straight through.
I mean, they've only lost 1 out of the 12 games they played against North American teams, at least on LAN, since their existence. So I think that's a pretty good and safe pick. I think you look at Liquid and you got to say, if they can't walk through this RMR pretty much entirely clean, then everything we've come to expect from them internationally has to go a little bit out the window. So
who have they lost to? Was it an M80 loss or something like that?
It was, I believe, a map to Furia or Pain. It was
they
one of the
lose to Legacy as well, not too long ago.
That was online too, yeah. But even still, that's a pretty big loss, I'd say.
Yeah, Legacy, not one I have listed as a big hitter at this event, but, an online map, an online series, maybe not the end of the world. Would be a big deal if they lost a series here, though. That'd be awful.
Yeah, and Liquid are in a weird spot because I think people are very down on this team because they're not performing at like big LAN events. Like they're playing against like top 15 level teams, and that's where Ultimate's having to change his style of game. He's having to play a little bit more passive. I think Yekindar as well is maybe struggling to find his sort of internal confidence because he's losing a lot of gunfights. But when you're in North America or when you're in the Americas region, these guys are going to be fine. The level of competition that they're facing at these top level tournaments is not going to be the same as in this RMR. So all those concerns I have about them, like their map pool is also very shaky when you start looking at them versus top level teams. But best of ones are actually going to favor the fact their map pool is fairly limited, and then they get to a best of 3 against a team that they're probably going to be very well researched on. Like a Pain or a Furia or a hell, an M80, complexity. These guys, when they're in those qualifying games, are probably going to face one of those kind of 4 juggernauts within the Americas region. And it doesn't matter if they have a weak map pool, they're going to make compensations. And they've actually shown some very good strategies, even against top level teams.
I agree.
Like their opening maps in series, what they had opening map win against Spirit, against Na'Vi, against G2, all pretty convincing wins. And, whether or not they lost those series afterwards, that's a whole different thing. But the opening maps in those series, they're very well prepared.
I think most of the issues they have to round out until they're like a full liquid, you know what I mean? Like a completely rounded team or small little issues. Like we talk about like closing games, like that's something that like historically liquid is maybe tied to their organization, not going to be able to do so
Sure,
well. I
yeah.
don't know if it's a curse or whatnot, but yeah, I think closing games is one thing. Like looking at their individuals and being able to rein in what they're doing towards the ends of games is also an issue I think that they have where maybe they're a little bit more brazen when they have to just get like 1-2 rounds to secure a win. And I want to see them a little bit more locked in depending on the type of game that it is, right? Like they go into a best of 3, it's map 2, let's say, and they're a map up. Like playing a little bit of different to the style that they've been putting forwards is, I think, maybe not a twists issue as a caller, like trying to shift how he's going to call in different situations. But maybe just as a team, they need to change how they're going to play a little bit, make different moves. Yukindar in particular, too. You were talking about how Ultimate's got to play a little bit more passive sometimes. And I think that that's also maybe incorrect and correct because I liked when he's aggressive. I like when he's up in their
Yes.
face to a certain degree. Like
Mm.
when he's got to like stop, that's what they run into a little bit into a wall.
I'd like to make an addendum. I mean, it wasn't actually Spirit that they won an opening map against. It was like Vitality, but you know,
Oh,
that's
pretty
neither here.
good.
That's
It's
neither here nor there.
not that deep.
Yeah, yeah. But it's I do agree. You know, Ultimate is maybe the biggest source point, even more so than Yukindar, I think, for me, because he made such a big splash when he came onto the team, and now he's kind
Yeah.
of been figured out. And you know, especially as a rookie player entering that circuit, the quicker you get found out, you have to be able to find an adaptation. Otherwise, you know, just as quickly as you came in, you will be kicked out.
And he just showed no respect when he dropped in too. That's what I like about him most. That he
He was stone
kind of came in
cold.
and he was like, yeah, he
Yeah.
was like, fuck you guys. Like I'm here now. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's just the difficult obviously, if you just look at the numbers, which pure numbers, like if you go from his time when he joins Liquid to about a month ago, we're talking like a high opening attempt rate, but mostly those opening kills, right? The last month, it's been more opening deaths than kills, which for an AWPer, typically, it's kind of hard to do. So against this sort of competition, we expect him to farm, we expect Yukindar to farm. And as much as I was saying, you know, there are some downs, and they've lost a lot of series recently, they've lost to Vitality, G2, FaZe, Na'Vi, FaZe, Vitality, G2, Vitality. Like, these are literally in order the losses they've taken in series. None of them are going to be here. So I think, yeah, as much as we do have bigger questions about Liquid, I'm very happy with this pick, and nothing can shake that confidence.
Right. I guess I'll just lead in with my pick because
Yes,
I'm second
please.
in this drafting order, and I am picking Furia. I think this team is kind of underrated, mainly because people are still so down on them from when Furia was an absolute internal shit show. And you know, in moments that still rears its head. But I think they've really been uptrending ever since the addition of Skulls. Obviously, that's a better fit for him. Like he's much more comfortable. He's speaking his native language. They are playing more cohesive Counter Strike. And I think my concern is maybe Fallen on the AWP, but I mean, when you've got Skulls, Yuri, Queserato doing what they do best, you know, Skulls in anchoring positions, Queserato, Yuri is like a tag team map control pairing, you know, sometimes
Cello
alongside.
patting Fallen's back.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes alongside Cello, you know, Cello is supposed to be kind of a space taker, but he just dies a lot. You know, I think this team is still very threatening, and I think the fact they had a good showing at IEM Rio is also a good way to sort of validate that step. They beat Na'Vi there, they beat Mouse there, and sure they lost to Mouse in the rematch, but that was to them, I think, just going missing weirdly in the semifinals versus Mouse. I think even Torji gave an interview afterwards, like, I don't even know what's going on, but you know, we're just laughing, having a good time, and we're winning rounds. And Fury had basically nothing to say in that semifinal. But you know, outside of that, I think they've been growing in the right direction, and I think this team has already kind of put itself even ahead of the likes of a Complexity in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Only because I think when I watch Furia, since they've kind of did this little bit of a rebuild with Fallen getting full reins, Kai period was kind of a throwaway. I think that's not really one that we were going to be like, this is the full 5. This is what we're expecting them to grow into. When then Skulls comes in, and I thought that was actually going to be a really big move. I think personally that Furia at its core is still capable of being a top 8 level team. That what they once were, if they can pull them up by the bootstraps with Fallen as a caller. I don't really think his AWP work is going to matter all that much as long as he's not like pulling like 0.9s. And then looking at a player like Skulls to fill the gaps between Skulls, or rather between Queserato and Yuri, has slowly but surely, I think, come into fruition. I think he's actually been a really good supplementary piece to this team. And you mentioned that Cello's kind of just been dying a lot on his openings and things like that. I think he's like not been a problem for this team until now. I think he's starting to become a little bit of a glaring issue for me, and I would defend him in previous iterations of this roster to where on Imperial he was filling his role absolutely perfectly. He was actually like kind of a star, in my opinion, in his role, because it's not easy to be an opener or easy to be one of these entry pack players, and now he's kind of like tapered off. And if he can't pick it up, I feel like you can't really say Queserato can do it or Yuri can do it because their opener is gone.
Yeah, I think just before you jump into, I
Mhm.
think Cello before was like a secondary or like tertiary space taker, and now
Yeah.
he is like the primary guy. Like he's
Mhm.
had to shift his roles quite substantially to be I guess a focal point, and maybe he's not cut out for it. You know, he's kind of been Fulton's right hand man, but because they need someone that can be assertive, be aggressive, Cello is filling that void, and
Yeah.
I hoped he would, but he's not doing a great job of it so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at the profiling, the numbers, and honestly, a couple of the demos, he is essentially running the roles that, in a way, Malbs plays, where on the CT side, he doesn't actually take that much aggression. He is, like, kind of more of just a role player. Then on the T side, he's expected to take an immense volume of opening attempts, and he's just dying left, right, and center. It's horrifying to watch. And where Malbs MD, you know, even in a bad setup, you don't throw all the right flashes, you don't have all the right util, he can just out-aim people in like a disfavorable situation. Like if he's just not favored, he's blinded almost, like he's half HP. I believe in him to hit a headshot. Cello just doesn't have that sort of mechanical like elasticity, that ridiculous like adjustment potential. So no, he has been getting the short end of the stick in the way they're using him as well. So I think that's been rough. The Rio run, I really want to believe in if I'm picking Furia. But if I'm not, I see basically 5, or is it ridiculous maps in the groups out of Queserato that are just, we haven't seen this level of Queserato for so long. All of a sudden, he just uncorks it, rips through them all. And then they get to the playoffs, they play Mouse, and I've watched the Torzi POV on that nuke game, and he's just holding wide open spaces. People are dry squeaking into him, and he's just shooting them over and over again. I'm like, was this, if this is the same team that played in the groups, and did they play like this? Because I didn't go back and check, but like, if that was the way they were doing it before, and it just, Queserato hit all those shots, right, I have very little faith in this actually lasting going forward. So I want to believe in Furia in general, figuring it out, but I don't know. This field, they have a good record against, at least. Even at events where we've not been so high on them, you know, pre-Rio, they've been able to beat teams like Red Canids with some consistency on LAN. So they're still a great pick here. I still have my reservations. I didn't have them as a team I would want to pick just because I'm always afraid they can bottle it at any given moment. As soon as Furia start getting heavy favorites, at least in the last sort of couple years, that's when they start really disappointing you. Like they have been really good at that super like sinking feeling when you watch them. They've mastered manifesting that in their fans. So I don't like the pick for me, but I love it for you. Good pick. It's gonna be a gripping watch, I think, in actuality, as they go in as heavy favorites into these teams.
Yeah, and that will lead into into mine, I think.
Yeah, you have back-to-back picks, so start us off. Which one are you going with?
Yeah, I'm gonna kick it with in the order of what I would have picked them, because they're, you know what I mean? Like this is my first pick. I would have gone first with Pain. I think you'd be a fool to look at the recent trajectory of Pain's HLTV and say that they're actually on a downtrend. I think that's actually very disingenuous to them because they've been getting in a lot of good LAN reps. They've been playing against higher level teams and they've been losing, but they've been taking maps, taking series close. You look at the bait game over in Katowice. That's one that you can look back on and say that that's a pretty good team they're playing against relative to their level and taking it that distance on LAN. Beating out Legacy and Monty, although best of ones, is also a very big win for them. And I think you look at their regional competition of MIBR, who they also consistently beat out, and then you have to contextualize the rest of the teams here. You look at everybody like Furia and Liquid and then maybe Complexity, and you say, yeah, those are probably teams that Pain are going to have a little bit of a struggle with. But I don't really see them going into a best of 3 with any other team here and not being able to say that they should, at least on paper, be able to take them. Whether it be even the distance in 3 maps and it's a close one, a nail biter, I still think that I would be pulling out for them time and time again. And that's something a lot of these teams also can't say they've had recently in terms of reps. They haven't been to these lands in the last like 3 months or so against the level of competition that they have. So with the preparation time that they've had and with the reps they've gotten in the last 3 months, I'd have to say that Payne are probably a cut above. And I also want to say that I think Snow, as young as he is still not even close to hitting his full stride. And I want to see little bits of beat and pieces over time come together in their game plan and system to where he's being incorporated more, because he's so young to where he could literally play any role, it feels like to me at this point in time, because I see him clutching. I see him playing an entry pack sometimes, taking initiative when he needs to, and trying to pull out rounds for them where he's not their playmaker. But I think, God willing, if he ever gets to the point where he has to, he definitely could. So I'm going to say definitely Payne is going to be my pick here. Regional dominance and also international. I think that they've been putting up a good couple of maps and numbers and series. So that's going to be that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Payne's a good pick. I do have my shared concerns about Snow, because I think this is the most complicated team he's ever been on. When he was on Case, he was, I mean, they didn't run much. He was left to his own device a lot of the times. Like when he was defending bomb sites, those sites were super chaotic, and he would get away with like 3 kills. Super good in those types of situations, and I think he has to kind of unlearn that to a certain degree. I think when the plan is simplified for him, he is, like you said, he's able to kind of do what almost any role for Payne if need be. But I don't think they're thrusting that responsibility on him when
No.
you've got confident players like Lux on the team that are more than willing to take that space instead. Or Kawes, these guys are soldiers that Big Uzer has, I think, more trust in so far. So I think they're keeping Snow on the wings to a certain degree. And, when he can pull off those clutches, he can get like good 2-3 kills on trades. They're satisfied. I mean, he's pulling his weight. They're kind of setting him up to be a star player, but they're also not tasking him with the most amount, I think, on this team.
I was going to say also, just as an aside, that this team is probably one of the more 5 fingers of one hand kind of teams that we have. Like you look at this team, and when they're in games, it's like all of them are middling around the same level of kills, like give or take like 3, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a fairly well-balanced roster for the firepower. I think that's an interesting dynamic they have, because you can get like relatively strong rifle performances from 4 different players, which is a very nice thing that you can be able to lean on. But obviously the key for them, they're similar to Mongols in this. They got an IGL who calls and who frags out like crazy, which is something that I think, I've said this on a couple shows now, it's going to become more valuable in like the coming couple of years. I think as the meta truly adjusts to the shorter games, the more involved coaches, we are going to see this fragging ability of the IGL come to the front of our minds just over and over again. We're like, can he be a liability? If he's a liability over the course of these rounds, we've only got so many gun rounds, we've got so many buys we can really guarantee ourselves. We might have to make some changes, some upgrades there. They don't have that worry. And going into these games, these BO1s, I think that's going to be a big key for them. Kawes and Lux, obviously the other 2 riflers who are primarily the consistent ones. We know Snow's a little talent, young, raw, but able to hit some shots. But Lux and Kawes also bear the heavy load of that. I think that their sort of downward trend in the rankings is somewhat, like you painted it as like a thing that's kind of overblown, I guess. Like it doesn't really do them justice. I do think that loss to Bait is a bit of an issue. If I'm Payne, I expect myself to beat, a 30th rated sort of European team who are, whilst dangerous, young, up and coming, a roster I would really back myself against. So I think it's been earned, but I do think they still remain, at least compared to the rest of the field, very well land tested. They've proved themselves against very high levels of opposition, taken maps off of fairly huge names, and been a danger all the way through. So yes, worst comes to worst, they'll play close series with Furia, Liquid, Complexity, M80, like these top sort of teams who play a lot of international play, and they will be heavily favored, I think, going into games with MIBR and everyone below pretty much just in the ranking. So no, Payne is a very solid team despite a couple shaky results recently. I still think they have like almost too many options to just go win them a game for them to ever really struggle here. They should be more than a lock.
Yeah. Then I guess that will draw me into my second pick, which in theory, I guess by many standards should have been or may have been my first, but it's not. And for the reasons that I'll explain, Complexity are going to be my second pick. I think I'm slowly losing my faith. I think they've just become a little bit too inconsistent for me, to where sometimes they look like they can be a top 5 competitor and other times they don't even look like they belong in the tournament. And I don't really know what to think anymore when I look at this roster that by all metrics should be top 10 in rankings all days of the week over teams such as, we'll say, Virtus Pro right now. I think Complexity on paper probably should be beating out a Virtus Pro that looks kind of in shambles in their own regard. Eternal Fire, who are just hitting over like CCT tier events, as people would say, and doing well, where Complexity should be making top fours at international S tier lands. And this is the kind of project that they built. This, when they came together, was the thing that they were looking to strive for, and they did for a certain period of time. But the system really just isn't following in what they were really kind of idealizing for themselves. And I think that that's got to be said that after this major, if they can't make a deep run, if they can't really make a statement for where they belong in the Counter-Strike scene, there might be changes to come. As a North American person, as a North American spectator and fan, it hurts me to watch some of these games. It really does. It's a brand of Counter-Strike to where I come to expect more from not only the individuals, but also the people like Elige who have come into this roster with a lot of information and wisdom that he was going to look to spread and give them, a new way of looking how to play with championship understanding of how the game works. And he did that for a time. It really did look like they entirely 180, to be honest with you, in a lot of their different fundamentals. And it's just crumbling now. It feels like the individuals aren't hitting their strides. They're losing out against teams and on maps to where they absolutely shouldn't any day of the week with the system and structure they have. Where like from entry to lurk, from like front to back of their 5 players, they have such good pieces in their roles. I just don't quite understand where it's all gone. Out the window, to be honest with you. And if they can't walk through this RMR as one of the cleaner teams, I'm going to regret even having picked them, because that's the hope that I'm giving them as my second pick and the 4th overall. So maybe a little harsh, maybe.
It's so easy to think that Complexity looked good when Elige joined, and especially at the start of CS2 when JT is your second or third best player on the team.
Yeah.
Like I think for a while, at the start, JT was almost shielding the fact that, Grim and Floppy weren't quite cut out for it. I think more Floppy than Grim, if I'm being honest. And now that JT is regressed in his individual impact, now it strains Elige and Holzerk that much more. And I'm very critical of Holzerk. I don't think he's the best AWPer in the world, but I also think he has to do a lot more because there's a lack of faith that the rifling pack is going to be able to get much accomplished outside of Elige. And I'd like to see this team, especially because they've extended the contract with Holzerk. If they're going to make changes, it would be for one of those riflers, if not both. And then you'd maybe question about whether or not Holzer can make that jump up or not, because I don't think there's enough team around him for an AWPer, especially on those T sides that Complexity put together. I don't think they're badly thought out. I just think the riflers are set up and just not hitting the critical kills, and then suddenly Holzerk has to try and hunt down a trade, or Elige has to change his pathing. It kind of breaks the structure of the rounds.
I think Grim is super serviceable, by the way. Out of the two, Floppy and Grim right now, I would definitely say that Grim is serviceable.
I can't stand by that. So where I jump in is essentially, I want to go back to how you started that, where you kind of say that this roster should be quite high. And as this might be an EU kind of, hating NA thing, honestly thought their brief stint with Elige was just Elige carrying the fuck out of a bunch of very average players. And I think that for both Grim and Floppy. I also kind of think if a Holzerk, I don't have that much love left. Like, he has the occasional series, brief time periods where back-to-back events. Oh, wow. Holzerk is now a tier 1 level AWPer, but
we're so back.
For the most part, yeah, it's really ugly. And it's been almost an entire waste of Elige. Like, he'll give you these that Pro League run where, sure, they end up 9th to 12th because Pro League has this massive, playoff format. But he gave us so many big games. And you just come out at the end of it and think, He kind of fell flat in the final playoff run, like the final 2 playoff games. And overall, there was no one else you could ever even imagine, give you that same sort of star performance. The rifle play just isn't strong enough. I don't see it. For me, there has to be multiple changes made. And I think Complexity have suffered by just sitting on the sidelines, watching the North American scene. Not much. Most of it hasn't gone by them because most of it's still below them. But pieces have made moves, have shown clear quality, and they've never been able to maximize it. So, no, for me, Complexity have... Maybe it's a financial issue. Maybe it's just a lack of impetus.
What would you do?
There's so many risks I can take. like attempts I can make to
Who would you replace?
I'll Grim Floppy out the door. Lake
Okay.
Jaber would have been in like 8 to 10 months ago. Like I would have made the change. I'd have taken the risk. I don't care if it ends up backfiring. I'd rather try it.
Take Lake Jaba in, no heartbeat.
Get rid of these guys. I watched these guys on the international scene and they're bad. If you want to stay NA, that is. If you want to go international, yeah, sure. There's a whole host of riflers you could have talked about. And I'm just assuming that Complexity with their big blue star, you know, want to stay North American.
Yeah, probably.
So that's why I say that's the assumption I make, just straight away.
Yeah.
Just take 2 young talents. I don't care how unproven. I don't care how shaky they are mentally. I don't care about any of it. I take a risk.
The
because,
KingT prospects.
Yeah, take my prospects, guys. It's fine. They're awesome. I mean, Lake's not even one of my prospects. He was just a guy who I once got recommended, pretty sure by you, like as a North American like hopeful. And I was like, even he knows who they are. Why isn't Complexity ever trying a damn thing? Like the commentators are screaming for these names. Like,
that's awesome.
Where's your analyst, Complexity? Where's your scout? Who is this guy who's not finding anyone? Because M80 found Lake and he's banging heads. So,
or I mean, Swisher and Rek as well. Like these guys are also very good on that M80 roster. Like, how can you?
Wow, Rek has come out of nowhere, dude.
Yeah, but that again, there's just like a lack. How do teams like M80 find guys that are, you know, good enough to I guess punch up, and Liquid and Complexity are just sitting around going, guys, there's no talent in North America.
NA's dead.
Play Valorant, guys. Just go play Valorant. Yeah, just sign a random player from Eastern Europe who barely speaks English, stick in him subpar roles, then blame him and kick him. Like, come on, guys, just do that on repeat.
And listen, we love to work off of meritocracy, you know, especially when it's like EU merit over NA merit. But you have to, if you're going to stick to that as your identity, you have to be able to do some solid like talent scouting in your region. Surely somebody has to be look at NI demos or like talk to these players at some point. Maybe they did do those talks and they just thought these guys. They'll have, you know, they're all too relaxed, you know, this may be the biggest opportunity of their lives, and they've come and just been like, hey, what's up?
I'm actually like low-key a little shocked that, I mean, maybe this sounds crazy, maybe it doesn't, that Automatic didn't get as many looks. I feel like Automatic is really good still.
I actually don't hate that take at all. Like, Automatic has been surprisingly good throughout all the mess he's been through, right? Because he's been through a lot of messy projects. He's actually been very solid.
Like, I feel like even if you just watch demos of what was the dumpster fire team that Evil Geniuses was, where he was in and out of that, I mean, like, frankly, even he there looked really good. Like, he made a lot of really good decisions. He individually looked like he was hitting shots, and he, as a reliable piece of a dying team, I feel like maybe not now. I mean, you certainly could do it now. I mean, he's not playing poorly even on NRG. You could look at him and say maybe as an M80 or a Complexity, perhaps even if things aren't going too hot, if you have a roll for roll, 1-for-1. Dude, Automatic. I mean, he's reliable. He's got winning experience still. He's very calm under pressure. I don't know. I think that'd be a decent enough shout, but that's all I really got.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be a slam dunk pickup for the fan base as well, because we all know America's still living off that one high. Like, y'all still probably watch the Boston Major like over and over again, just like trying to go
Thanksgiving.
Sweep, just like
15-11 lead. They're coming back.
Cloud9! We yelled at the dinner table, yeah!
How have they
done this?
The Wolverine meme with the photo, and it's just them holding up the trophy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. But yeah, that's it.
That sells so many jerseys. I know it. I just know it.
It's the only player I think that I could say with provability as a North American I would pick up for that team. And then beyond that, like, yeah, we could talent scout, but frankly, I think that there's a lot more work to be done in terms of raising these North Americans as people before we.
Hell, give me Hex before I fucking sit here and watch another mid event from KoL. Like, go give me Hex. Give me something that's new. Like, I'd rather be bad and new than just old and mid as fuck. Like, that's my way of seeing this Complexity roster.
Kind of like NIP before, right? So like, please just
but please don't do that.
Mid as fuck.
I mean, NIP is also just cursed, but you know,
NIP
for a long time, it was just kind of like, please do something new, or at least like aim to service the Swedish audience. There are Swedish talents out there, and then it just didn't, and they kept international, and then now they're going back to Swedish, and now they have still a dumpster fire. So
yeah, and they can't get the players.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. Just wait a few more years where the...
oh, my heart.
It'll be fine. It'll come back. Yumi, you've got another pick.
Yeah. I wasn't going to use this pick so early, but now that we've talked about him, I feel like I have to. I'm picking M80.
Damn it.
Yeah. I mean, this team is probably the second best North American team right now in my heart. I have them over Complexity as well. I have more faith that the project is built in with the right ethos. You know, they're trying to develop new talent. They bring in Sin and Slacks. Slacks mid as fuck Opera in EU, but
Yeah.
man, this guy has gotten a lot of confidence. You know, kind of like the Fozy treatment. Where he went off to Asia and he's like, I didn't even know I had this type of game in me. And so Slacks is more confident. Sin is calling actually a pretty comprehensive game. And to be honest, I don't even really care that much about Lake. You know, he's trying to fill the void of Malbs, and he's doing a serviceable enough job. You know, it's like 70%, 80% of the way there. But for me, it's really the structure in which they're trying to facilitate a player like Lake. You know, they have good set pieces to enact those opening picks. You have Swisher and Rec that can always clean up in mid rounds alongside Sin or Slacks themselves. I think this team just plays with very honestly, it comes across like they have very clear communication. And considering they imported 2 EU players, that just speaks volumes to the amount of practice or the system that they've put in place. So I like M80, solid team, maybe not like world beaters, but a very good sort of feeder tier 1.5 kind of project that I can see punching up quite consistently.
Yeah, Tony, give us the insight. Why? Firstly, I want to hear how much you rate this team, because they are fun and they are American. But also, tell me exactly why none of these players should be on KoL whilst we go through it.
No, I mean, it kind of wrapped up in what he had said about the tier 1.5 feeder team. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it is and probably will be for the longest time, because the only thing that the M80 can really logically do in order to bolster their team is to kick players that don't really deserve to be kicked, and upgrade for players that are either too much money or not American. So if you're going to do that, then yeah, I mean, great. But I don't think that that's wise. I think that they have a really good business model going on right now, frankly, to where they don't have to salary these big names any beyond what they've already got. They're already pushing top 20 in the world, top 30 in the world consistently, and now maybe even taking best of threes and making deep runs at tournaments where prize money is going to come in and they're going to get good eyes under their brand. And I think that it's really wise what they have going on for them right now. And if they were going to pick up a player for Complexity, I don't really think any of them are bad shouts is the problem if Complexity wanted to make a move. I think that taking a little bit of like a dive or a risk, especially with this being the next up American team, would be like an option, right? Like, I think it would be definitely worth their money if they wanted to pull in a Lake and say, all right, let's make this guy one of our shooters that we need right now in a system where Liege is the only one firing off. Just focus on these 2 guys. I think that's definitely something they could do. But yeah, I don't know. M80 have a really good thing going for themselves right now. They have really good energy between the players. It looks like their vibes on stage and in studio are really good. Like, unlike Complexity, where it doesn't even look like they're fucking friends sometimes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when I don't have that same energy, I feel like, from them, where when I watch M80 in the studio, you can see Sin, Slacks, and Lake all getting active with one another. Always the perfect high fives and a little bit of a laugh between players side to side. It's really interesting to see how their energy works and when they're winning and losing too. So I think that M80 is definitely a good pick. And I also think M80 is just a good team. And whoever did the scouting from top to bottom for this roster did a damn good job.
Yeah, that's essentially it. Like, they've done such a good job. Honestly, since bringing in Sin and Slacks, like, I liked the idea of the Sin move just because I liked what he'd done in Germany with Big and Big Academy. And then when he comes in, I start hearing, in interviews, he's got all these ideas, all these ideas. All right, come on. I've heard this before about young kids, like, kind of going to IGL teams. I've heard it about ZTR a dozen times. I've heard it, like, about some other younger guys. And then I hear about him, I'm like, all right, pump the brakes. Let's see what this does. And he ends up, utilizing his pieces quite well.
Yeah.
Finding his place in the system to frag as well, which has been key. And I think now with I like Lake, but he's still a downgrade. Malbs MD is a phenom.
Yeah.
Like, it has required a lot more trade fragging, I guess, out of Sin to be like up there with him to really make those same sort of punches punch. But it has worked. It has worked very well for them, and they have lost some of their dynamism, I guess, in terms of facing elite teams, but it has kept them incredibly consistent with the rest of the field in the Americas. So I think at this event they have a great chance. I just think, I don't know, some of these teams like in the lower half of the seeding who are like Brazilian, South American, I think those games are going to be spicy. I think those games are going to be real fun. So I think we have run out of locks. Now that we get to M80, I think we're sort of approaching the territory where I'm getting a bit shaky in terms of like how confident I am. So yeah, no, it's still a fun pick, a fun team. And as you're right to point out, no real clear upgrade paths for them. It's just about making this group work, getting their brand out there, and afterwards seeing what they can do with it. So no, really well-run org. And yeah, a massive improvement on the logo, because the old one was a bit weird.
I love the old one.
I kind of like the old one.
I was a fan.
I mean, they've gone from like a hand grenade.
Oh, it was so cool.
Which was awesome, to now a nuclear symbol, which is less
nuclear
cool.
waste symbol.
Yeah.
It's toxic. It's NA.
But they're not waste.
Okay, all right, okay.
That's how it works. All right, we're on to me for my double pick. Man, you guys have locked out your favorites, so there's no point me locking that in until the very end, I don't think. So yeah, I'm gonna go both my underdogs here. And we're gonna lead off with a team who I'm picking this team. I have never watched a single second of their Counter-Strike games.
Okay.
Never watched a single second of them play. But I was going through their match history and I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if Bestia managed to make it through? The team from Argentina.
Tomasin is the GOAT.
Exactly. Tomasin's the GOAT. ynoT, who's their caller, I believe, and Orpa.
Lukov's also sick.
Yep. Lukov also shown some great stuff in terms of the numbers. Look, again, I have no deep level analysis on this roster because I have watched exactly 0 minutes of them play this year. But all I know is they seem to always pop up. They get wins over the other like regional teams quite a lot. They're dangerous. Probably got a lot of like belief and passion coming into this. It's the perfect mix for a team that's going to qualify for the opening stage and get immediately trounced. I love it. I'm riding with Bestia. Please get me a few more points. I need to catch the guests and viewers. We're only 2 points behind. I keep saying this every episode, but I'm 2 points behind the guests and viewers. It'd be so sick to win this, and I'm hedging my bets on Bestia.
That's a good bet. I mean, not really much to analyze regarding them at higher levels. When they do show up, they show out, though. I mean, 2 best-of-3 wins over M80 online. That's pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hate this because I only picked M80 because we were talking about them, so I was like, he's gonna pick them in the double pick somewhere, and I was kind of hoping you would just avoid Bestia and go with somebody else in that lower rung. They're interesting. In the same way that we're talking about throwing Malbs out with like limited resources, and sometimes just like even if he's not prepared for fights, he'll kill them. That's kind of what Tomasin does on this team. Like, it's actually kind of insane. Both him and Lukov can both just be blissfully unaware and pop off, and that makes me slightly concerned about Bestia to the degree that how often are they going to get away with that? I mean, in the online officials, it seems fairly consistent, but now that we're talking about the transition to LAN, I am worried that the extra time that it takes for them to react won't be there for them in that LAN environment. They won't be able to hit those like almost 120-degree flicks onto players and get away with 2 kills running out mid solo on Ancient. They have a very good map control pair between those two, though. I mean, those guys take fast spawns. They try and hinge together. Like, if we're talking about Mirage, they will try and swing off each other. Ancient's the same. They're very active, both of them. So one takes contact, the other is like right there with him. And it makes them a very exciting team to watch. But also, if you can read ahead even slightly to know that one player is here and the other is there, you're already reading half the map. And so long as you're not getting demolished in the opening map control takes, then I think Bestia are a team that you can actually call around quite substantially. But I think I saw Trav on HLTV confirmed. He was saying that he did an interview with I think ynoT for, what was it, Thunderpick, I think. And he was saying that they were saving strats. So
the Argentinian Fallen.
Well, yeah.
For better or worse.
He's shooting just like Fallen too.
Ooh.
He's saying he's saving strats, and they've still got more up at their sleeve, which could be just a total bluff, but also they play very sporadic, like fast calls out of spawn styles that I wouldn't be surprised if they actually do have a couple tricks up their sleeve. So this was like kind of a 70-30 kind of pick for me if I was going to pick them as an underdog. because I think they on a good day would be able to make it through.
Yeah, honestly, that's a really good pick. I made a little bit of a joke as to like, yeah, they beat M80 online twice, but like now that we're on land, and you don't have to really worry about a whole lot other than squeaking by the teams that you're punching at your same level for, right? Like there's enough spots to be moved into the next stage of the major where what is it? I think 7. So like they could very easily be 1 of 7. Like that is not a question for me. It's just going to have to be them overcoming teams that have maybe made a couple of changes recently, you know, taking advantage of the timing to where on like I think after CCT Series 2, I think a lot of teams decided to make some moves. They started to do these little like player swaps, the 1-for-1. Actually, Zoc being one of those players, having been picked up from Dusty Roots. So like they had a lot of time to do their scouting. They had a lot of time to really incorporate this new player. And I think that he's not elevated the team necessarily. I think that the players have kind of elevated themselves with him being in the roles that he's fit. Like Lukov and Tomasin have just been blowing people out the water, man. Like if those two guys can go into the server and they can show a good day, it really doesn't matter what everybody else does as long as they're finding themselves serviceable 1v1s where they win theirs and then Tomasin can get a double and then force the other team to save. Like walking around the map with those two guys barreling out, it's gonna be a big if they can do that against some of these rosters, if they can do it consistently over the course of many best of 3s. But I'll have my reservations in saying that they definitely can.
Yeah, what I love about this conversation, you just built, like, in my head, the narratives I need to follow when I'm watching this team. Hopefully, get me those extra points. Like, obviously, I saw the numbers. I'm not crazy. I didn't pick them without any research. I knew those two would be, like, high, like, impact sort of opening players. I'm liking this, like, I've got a secret, like, Argentinian Fallen. Like, okay. I like it. Let's see how this plays out. Hopefully I get a classic Fallen, not a modern Fallen in terms of the AWPing. But
he actually, I will say, he has not looked as bad as I thought he would look coming into Furia as an AWP player, but he's not like a superstar, but like, he's not terrible. He's not like terrible. I'll give him a little bit of credit.
Yeah, I mean, if we can deal with Cadian being a AWPer at the top level, then Fallen can maybe get away with it so long as the rest of the team looks cohesive.
Yeah. Like, I mean, calling and opping is like an old meta, straight up. Like, I think CS2 opping is hard enough.
South America loves it, though. There's so many opping game leaders down there.
True.
And if you can call okay and op okay, you're probably going to be doing better than the in-game leaders and oppers in the country that are just doing that one thing not very good. So
that's fair. That is very fair.
Which actually will lead into my pick. Okay. That's gonna lead into my one of my picks.
It's not your pick yet.
Not yet.
Unless
you assuming you get to pick them.
Are you gonna fucking daily double me right now and just swipe away my picks?
All right, he wants an AWP IGL.
No, they're not. They're not by GL.
Oh, he doesn't want an AWP IGL. Thank you for helping.
No, not by GL.
Who is it he's trying to pick? Oh, I'm taking the piss. I'm not going to pick an AWP IGL here. I am going to take my second pick right now. Another underdog. And I'm going to take the team that I have the most personal attachment to out of pretty much the entire event, because I'm going to take Wildcard. Like, for me, they're a roster I've been very interested in, been delusionally hopeful about at times as well. But I'm going to continue that faith. Like, I am going to continue to believe that their players are going to be the stars that I thought they would be when I first started watching them play, and just go all in. So Wildcard, as a roster, have done something interesting. They signed 2 Swedes and then failed to get them in the country, which was, well, especially Fuzi, couldn't get him in the country. So he was playing on 100 ping for a lot of their officials initially when he joins, which I thought was very funny considering they were winning all these games and Fuzi was fragging out, which with an AWP on that ping is just... Buddy, how? Like, how does that work? Every time I've watched an AWP 100 ping get swung, he's usually just dead. But however he managed it, it was beautiful. So they're also, for me, a very soundly founded roster. There's an IGL who has history, pedigree, sure, not the greatest of recent form in terms of like big teams he's been on, because he hasn't really been on many. But on this roster, at least, I know I have an IGL who knows what he's doing. I've got riflers that I believe in. I think Jaber is up and coming to be one of the better closers we have in the scene. It's just a matter of when he gets there. He's got a great deagle, great like shot fight selection, and I think he's going to be up there eventually. He's just a bit raw, and I think lacking a little bit of mojo, I think, still. He doesn't seem like, when I look at pictures, he doesn't seem like the most assertive and like in control of the situation guy. He's still like the moment moves him a little too often, but I believe in him. Susp is the complete opposite. Like, Susp just seems like he's such a unfazed guy, like by anything that you can throw at him. Pressure, not too bothered. Different roles, not bothered. He's going to frag, and he's going to be a solid rifle player. Fusi, we mentioned, just he found his confidence in China. I'm not sure how. He found some Eastern wisdom, I guess, and just started believing in himself. Comes back to Europe, maintains the fragging numbers he had in China, which we all thought were a bit empty. We all looked at the numbers and went, oh yeah, 1.4 rating, fuck off. He came back and drops a 1.27 in like a rare atom versus a real legit team. You're like, oh no, he is still kind of that guy. So we're a big fan of this roster. Sonic, I haven't even mentioned, he's just been so solid, and he's finding more and more ways to get his kills in, which I found surprising. Like, I thought he'd take a sort of backseat to the young riflers. Instead, he's just been a very effective cog in the system. And I have a lot of faith in this roster to outperform this sort of like very lower sort of seed they've been assigned, or ranking that we currently have for them. They seem like a very dark horse and a pick to go all the way here.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit disappointed from what I've seen in Susp. I expected him to join this roster and be a lot bigger and better of a name for North America to be worried about going into what is, an international team now, effectively. Somebody who migrates over with a little bit of familiarity in Fuzi. They've got, like you say, a really stable caller with experience, which I agree with. And yeah, I don't know. I expected Susp to unlock a little bit, to become one of the best riflers in North America, effectively, in all the tournaments and qualifiers we'd see him in. And frankly, I haven't seen that. I think he's been outshined by Sonic and JBA time and time again. I think Fuzi, like you say, also honestly being not only the better of the two in the transition into North America, but also just blowing my expectations out of the water of what he's capable of as an individual.
Yeah.
I was very, very shocked to see that Susp wasn't really punching the way that I wanted him to. But with that being said, he's not a different player. He's the same player that I expected to have that level, and he's only 19 years old. He's very, very fresh in North America even still. So with time, with good LAN representation, maybe they can actually pull that out of him. Maybe we can see a more well-rounded wild card to where they can actually start to be a little bit more of like a dominant force of swing. I want to see them playing up against teams on LAN where I can expect, the Stanislaw of old, who already understands how to play on LAN against good rosters without wavering. I want to see that spread across all 5 players, and he's got young, unknown entities. That's really good. That's really big for him. And I think that if he's going to make that happen, it doesn't have to be soon, but it's definitely going to have to be soon enough to the point where you can believe in the full 5 moving forwards and saying that they have a pathway.
I think the promising sign for these guys is what they did at ESL Challenger Atlanta, and they still made it to playoffs, even though they had to use Friend instead of Fozy, who had visa issues or something of the sort. And so I think the good news was that the calling seemed good. Like, even with Friend in as a part of that team, they gave him a little bit of autonomy towards the end of their run at Atlanta. But by and large, Friend wasn't performing outside of expectation. The rest of the wildcard were still doing a lot of work. And to be honest, Sonic is the real highlight for me, just because, this guy's like entering mid-round adjustments are there. He's kind of the most important piece on this roster. And I think it's so easy sometimes at least I know I forget that Sonic he's not that old. I think he's just been around the circuit for such a long time that I kind of expect him to be like bordering 30, but the man's 25, turning 26 in December. He's still got quite a few years ahead of him. And before he used to be like a slower style player, more lurking, and now he's front of the pack and doing so much for this team. So I think I'm very high on Sonic right now. Sounds like some street drug. And Jaber,
it makes you
me,
go fast, man. It makes you go fast.
It probably does. Jaber, I think, is the one that maybe disappeared a little bit in Atlanta, which was, I think, a bit of a surprise to me, because I think he came in with a bit of attitude to him. And, I think he was, talking shit to, I don't know if, or Lake was talking shit, I think, to Jaber, and then Jaber did clap back in the second round when they got to play them again. But I think there's still a lot of room to grow with this team. I don't know that I'm all there with them yet, but that's why they're, I guess, a suitable underdog. They're a team that on a given day, if Sonic gets a lot of production, if Fozy does, this team becomes one of the more lethal in North America. And to be honest, some of these South American teams probably would just get shit on, to be honest.
Yeah, they're an interesting roster. And yeah, you say about like Jaber kind of struggled in Atlanta, and that's what kind of inspired me. That whole thing where I'm talking about, like, sometimes the moment moves him, right? Like, he's just not quite found himself solidly, comfortably in those big games. So hopefully this is another opportunity for him to develop, and hopefully another chance for Tony to become a sussy P believer, because, man, Suspicious P is an absolute don.
I'd like to be.
I'm a huge fan. Both him and his twin, but they got separated for some annoying reason. But all right. What, Tony? We're back to you. No, we're not. We're not back to you at all.
No, one more.
God, you got me excited as well for your own picks. Come on, you please steal it. Steal it from him.
Don't do me dirty.
I don't know. Is your thing like a fox? Because
I'm not going to say nothing about anything.
My thing's a fox. I'm picking that red Canids.
Shit! Oh, I'm so mad.
It was kind of between Bestia and red Canids, but then when I looked at some of the recent games, I'm like, wait a second. Bestia are beating red Canids, and red Canids are also taking some wins off like the top South American teams at the moment. Bestia are as well. You know, both those teams I think are kind of on the precipice of being another like 9Z or MIBR team kind of emerging out of the region. Obviously they have big names on this roster. I think it's hard to deny that. I mean, Henny and coldzera are still very assertive pieces to this team. And Davidus is, I guess, one of the focal points as well, because Henny and Cold float about a lot, but Davidus, his role is pretty consistent. He will take fights, he will take space, and he will hunt for information in mid-rounds if they need it. That, and they've got like a very solid anchor player in Venom0, I think. You know, they can, the reason they can be so aggressive as a trio so often is because they have a lot of reliance on Venom to get his kills, or at least play for his life, and then they can, you know, posture up for a retake. Nathan's just he's bodyguarded by Davidus a lot, to be honest. It feels like they pair together when David's going for opening duels and Nathan's behind him. Even on map control where they're playing passive, they are always like within arm's length of each other, just in case Nathan somehow gets targeted, I think.
Yeah. By the way, Nathan was the not very good AWPer, not very good IGL that I was talking about before.
Yeah, well, he's not open anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah, for a long time I was like, what are you doing, Nathan? But he's made the right adjustment. He just now needs to do a little more on his rifling now too. I think the calling has been fine though. I think the fact they've got Henny and coldzera, there's a little bit more autonomy that Nathan doesn't have to front load with strategies as much anymore. Those guys will come up with ideas and he can facilitate that, and then they can make adjustments. Their CT sides in particular are a lot better. I think their T sides still get a little messy, but they're a team that can on just like an average day actually, you know, beat an Imperial and MIBR a pain sometimes as well.
I was clamoring for them to pick up Henny, so when he got put on the free agent market, I was like, they'd be a fool to not replace Nathan. But Nathan taking the reins of IGL, if that's something they believe in, I think is also 100% a valid idea. And if they believe in it, like I say, then, you know, that's great, because they have players who can make up for that. But they don't have players that can make up for the rifling numbers he's putting up right now. But if he starts to, you know, look a little bit better over time, then maybe they, you know, push the envelope a little bit further beyond even what they have now. That'd be really cool. I think to see them in more of a LAN setting more consistently, because Henny is still an absolutely incredible AWPer individually. Like, there's no doubt. Like, he's easily, in my opinion, a top 2 Brazilian AWPer. And that hasn't even really come close, in my opinion, in the last like year, maybe even 2. But you look at Venom0, who's also extremely young. You can mold him. That's a player that Fallen wanted. coldzera got to him first. Oops. But moving into like the later stages of Counter-Strike, where they need to start fostering the talent, you need these people like a coldzera, or even now a Taka who's coming back, to be able to do that, to have a place for them to say, you know, I want to play with X player and learn from X player and try and become a better individual. Because where like some of these teams where they're just throwing, you know, pieces into groups of people who just need a roster at whatever given point in time in Brazil, it's like a monster mash of different players every like couple of months, it feels like. But with a team like Red Canids, at least they've kept to this same identity for long enough.
Yeah, no, this is a roster that I had on my list. Like, in terms of the underdogs I wanted to pick, they were one of the 3. Essentially, I was just, in case someone snuck a Bestia pick in early, snuck a Wildcard for some reason in early, instead of taking one of the favorites, I had them as my backup. Yeah, it's got to be said, the top-end talent on this team is pretty powerful, like very potent. Davideus, Henny, as a duo of like stars, essentially, are about as good as it really can get for a team in Brazil / South America who don't have Yuri Keserato, you know, that level of talent. So no, they have a great top end. But yeah, I'm not always sold on coldzera when it comes to big international events. Like, I just think he's not quite there. Like, he's a bit off the pace. But maybe this is the exact kind of event you want him at. So no, they would have been a lethal pick, a dangerous upset team. You're right about the Nython thing, though. Like, if he can just be okay, not awful, they're a threatening team to do even bigger things. But for now, we just have to pray that he's not a liability to the point that it costs them those big BO1s.
I think what's the biggest red flag is that, you know, in-game leaders, when they know they're not going to be the heaviest hitters on the team, will throw themselves in first. You know, like, you look at Hooksy, you look at Carrigan. I think, you know, Alexei actually doesn't do it because he's not that bad. Snacks will sometimes do it, but not so much recently because Malbs is sick. I think there's a precedent set where if you can't rifle that good, you go in first, you take space, and you get your star riflers to be in those late round situations, or you get them to guarantee trades. The problem I have here is that they are not doing that. They are just like, Nathan, we are going to shield you as much as we can, and then we will play from there. And maybe Nathan is calling that way on purpose. It's just, it to me, it doesn't reek of a lot of confidence that he himself knows that he's going to, you know, at least get the space for his team, or at least get traded or something.
Dude, I'm down for whatever he's down to change, because honestly, truthfully, he needed something.
That is true. You know, he can learn rifling.
Yeah.
He can learn rifling, yeah.
He needed something.
We're saying that a lot recently. He can learn rifling. Don't worry,
He can
guys.
learn.
He'll adapt to rifling. He'll adapt. But yeah, no, I reckon it's definitely dangerous. And we do finally get on to the very excited. Why not? You've now got 2 picks to pick 2 underdogs. I can't wait to hear why you think Crew are going to make it all the way.
Yeah, I mean, before we get to my Crew pick, my totally real and existent Crew pick, we're going to start with, I guess, Legacy. Legacy's the last of the top of, you know, where we had the top 4 of Furia, Liquid Complexity, Pain, M80, MIBR, Imperial, 9Z, and then on that next bracket, it's Red Canids, Bestia, Wildcard, and then Legacy. That's what I've got left. I'm going to stick with them. I was going to pick them regardless if I got the opportunity. They're kind of a weird team. I've been following their core for like 4 years now. I think most people have, and they've been pushing for what has been like a top 15 aspiring core, I would say, with Dumao and Lotto being the forefront of that, obviously, and then kind of like filtering players in here and there. And in what I thought like systematically could have very well have been with maybe like a Taco and a Henny, a top 10, maybe even potential team, because I think they can shoot really hard. But you know, they lose their in-game leader and captain in a little bit of an odd stint, to where on 0-0 Nation it was both Taco and coldzera at the same time. Taco gets phased out for medical reasons and then entirely released after not really much communication regarding whether or not he'd return. Nekis finds himself in the captain role, uninspiringly so sometimes. I think they really lack in the mid-round. I frankly just think that they have a lot of issues in terms of reining in aggression and also using it when they need to. Maybe that's not to discredit Nekis. Maybe that's a player issue, but I think that he's definitely really not been my favorite pick for what they need in terms of a captain. And Sadzin slotting into the team gives them an upper. He's pretty young. He's gotten, you know, not a whole lot of experience to where now he can start to build that up, a reputation for himself over time as maybe somebody to keep an eye on in Brazil as a sniper talent. I think that's honestly a pretty big one. That's going to be a name to watch for the future. And having actually gotten the opportunity to scrim against them with Fisher College on a multitude of occasions, I think that they have a lot to work on that they've slowly ironed out over time. And if they can continue at like a slow but steady trajectory, then cool, great. But I just haven't really seen that. Instead, it's kind of been like a slow and steady decline from a team that looked like they could have been punching upwards and making lands and, you know, actually doing damage. I instead find them kind of plateauing into a point where they're not really, in my mind, going to break out of a top 30 level if they can't change something. If they can't find themselves either all inspired at the same time as 5, or maybe a 1-player move, I don't really know if I can see them making themselves into this next stage of the major with confidence, but I think that still they should absolutely be making themselves to that next level. I think that in terms of maybe breaking through top 30 in international competition, not quite there yet, but in terms of regional dominance, Yeah, they've been there. They've been there, done that. The last time we saw them on land was last major, actually. Funny enough. And they didn't look great, but they also didn't look very bad. So an 8-month span between Katowice Challenger event and then the last major is kind of deep, I think. That's kind of a little bit of a sprint, an 8-month gap. But all of those things taken into consideration, they're also kind of, a question mark in that regard. Do they have maybe something up their sleeve coming into this next major cycle that they didn't have last time around? Who knows? But they need to show it now because they're on a little bit of a timer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't have tons to say about Legacy, mainly because I haven't been watching them properly since Cold Zero left. I'll maybe check in on this team every now and again and be like, actually, how is YouM3 doing? Oh, he's still farming? Okay, good. And then I'll just move on with my life. And that's, he's like the only real bright spark for me in terms of, I actually think you're probably right. This team is probably plateauing and maybe even declining if they don't do something soon. And at that point, if you're YouM3 and you're kind of hard carrying your team in some of these games, you are probably going to look to greener pastures. I think there are teams, like Furia, for example, that maybe want a guy that is willing to take space and does it very efficiently. So I think that they'll have to very seriously consider that. YouM3 himself, and then I think Furia as well might be looking down and just going, this might be a better fit for us.
Yeah, YouM3's been the talent from Brazil for, it feels like forever, right? Like he's the guy you're supposed
4
to...
years, it feels like.
Yeah, like literally, like since he's been a 17-year-old, just like, all right, YouM3, cool. Oh yeah, watch him. Ooh, he can do a lot. He can rifle, he can open, he can close, he can AWP. Wow, lots of talent. Is he on a good team? Never. Absolutely never on the right team to get him into the big events where we really want to see him play. So that's an interesting spot because, yes, obviously, YouM3 and Lato as a rifle duo have been together a while, and both have shown incredible levels at various times. I mean, it's kind of weird to now look at the roster with Sadzin joining, and he's putting up solid numbers, it seems, in domestic play, and I'm like, okay, there may be something to this. But then I remember the problems they always seem to have, where it's like, well, they just don't seem to have the right structure and approach to really win games. Like when it comes to the big lands, the tougher opponents, it's just not the right coach IGL duo to make it all work. So if you can, and I'm not saying, actually, just to go back on it, they probably haven't, YouM3 and Lato haven't been with the right coach IGL duo basically ever. Like when, even going back, maybe Taco briefly, there was that moment where I think it was the God Sent roster.
Yeah, they looked really good, actually.
Kind of believed with Taco.
I did.
Yeah, we all did. But then that didn't last, and the rest of it has been a pretty grim, dodgy history of underwhelming calling. So I kind of have to be end it on a bit of a dour note, but you can't deny the talent on the roster. So in that sense, they are a pretty great underdog pick. They've got the talent to just punch up and potentially make something work.
Yeah. And then I guess last for me, definitely not least, but I think having seen and experienced Nouns on LAN in these last couple of months, even at Fragadelphia, Chicago, where I witnessed them play, they're pretty locked in. These guys have a head on their shoulders to where they get to their stations and they want to sit down and they want to win. There's nothing really cut and dry about being a competitor, right? But when it comes to these guys, they're eating healthy. They've got players who have their heads squared on straight in terms of what they need to do individually inside and outside of the server to ensure that they're prepped and ready to play. I think that's pretty underrated. And then also looking at their individuals in North America, at least in regional competition, where they get the opportunity to farm a little bit. We've had our, naysaying about Junior in years past. I think Junior's kind of fallen back into the form that we once come to expect from him in terms of being aggressive and confident. He's kind of regained that level after Furia kind of put him in an awkward place, to say the least. I think since then he's regained that same mentality, and that's great, because he's got players around him to supplement, like Rush, who's going to be selfless. He's going to do what he needs to do in order to win. If he's got to go first, he's going first. If he's got to throw the utility, he's throwing the best goddamn flash you've ever seen, and they're blind. Like, he's given them a little bit more of an oomph factor since joining them. It's been 5 months. So that doesn't really, honestly, I think, justify saying that he's like new anymore. He's fully integrated into their team. They've had the time to go in and out of the server and say what they need to do to win these maps and win these series. And honest and truthfully, I think they can take it. I think they can move themselves into that next level of the major. And I think that one of the biggest driving factors that I've not yet said is going to be George. That's a guy that we've been looking at and talking about now for quite some time as well. Ever since I think, geez, honestly, back to maybe like Triumph time, maybe even just before he joined Nouns and then flipped over to Evil Geniuses, probably more notably in Evil Geniuses, where we were saying this guy was going to be one of the better players moving up through the rungs. And although he hasn't done that, he has not stopped fragging. He has kept at that same pace ever since. Individually speaking, you'll watch him in the server kind of blow up every competition he plays up against, high and low. He looks like he's at least giving them a run for their money when he needs to hit a shot in a 1v1. And even though maybe the game plan falls apart here and there, maybe it just doesn't really work out in the long term, they've taken wins off of teams like Liquid. Although they weren't in, the best state with what was going on between Cadian, Skulls, and Yakindar, that era of Liquid is still one that, individually speaking, you should be able to say they take everyone every day of the week in North America, right? They lost in the closed qualifier for that IEM Dallas to where Nouns took them the full distance in the 3-map affair where they didn't even have Rush yet. So I think that when you look at their regional competition, yeah, sure, they're blowing them out the water. Moving into the international level next up, they're going to need to get those kinds of lands in to say that, George is tested and proven. But as far as the RMRs go, I think George is more than ready enough, and so are Nouns.
I am not as, I guess, optimistic about Nouns. I think George is a bit of a noob stomper. I think when he plays lower tier North American teams, he absolutely farms. And then he plays a team that has a little bit more structure and is like flashing into their peaks. They're using good utility against him. And I think he really struggles. Some of that's going to be exposure. And some of that's just going to be, I guess maybe just getting too used to running out and killing people really quickly. Because he can do that. But I think he looks visibly uncomfortable in moments where the team is playing to a higher caliber than Nouns typically play.
I think you should watch the Wildcard game if you want to watch a good game of how he's evolved in that regard, though. Because that's a really good one to watch back if you're interested.
Which Wildcard game?
It was the best of 3 in ESL Challenger. It was like 3 weeks ago or so. It was a really good watch, actually, I think. It was pretty good.
All right.
I didn't want to cut off your point.
No.
Definitely a noob stomper in many ways.
I think that's just like how I see George, and I think the rest of the team is kind of okay. I just don't see them doing too much, and there's a reason this is like a last pick underdog to me. This was gonna kind of be my last olive branch as well if you hadn't picked them, because now I'm left with some very tough decisions to make.
What do you mean, Crew? Crew's still out.
Keep building it up. You're not going to take Crew when you get to it.
I'm so blue right now, dude. Come on.
Unreal. But look, I think Nouns bringing in Rush might be the best thing they could have ever done, because I feel like he's an incredibly serious person, and I take him seriously, which is very helpful for me when we're looking at NA team, that I take someone on the roster seriously. And that guy is Rush. And it's not just because he's got great arms. Like, that forearm pops. But great genetics, buddy. But no, either way, this is a roster that I think has nice structure to it now, with like, I'm clear with my stars, my support pieces, how I want this team to play. I just do share the same fears. Not exactly as just, this guy's a noob stopper, but more, these guys just don't have the pedigree against even the top competition here, like from Brazil, the Liquids, who don't really come down to face them that often. Like, they don't have too much for me to go off of to really believe. But I think this might be the best time to have ever believed in them, just based on these factors. So, yeah, Nouns, a cool pick. I'm kind of rooting for them to play very well here. Not necessarily to go through, because I didn't pick them, but at least give us a good showing. A good level from George, a roster that looks cohesive and plays a solid game. That's all I really want from them, and that'd be optimism for me. That'd build a lot of hope for North America, but also these specific 5 players. We have a couple picks left, one of which is Yumi, who has an underdog to fill in, and we've built up to this moment. You've all been waiting for it. He's going to pick him. We just know it. 4 Argentinians, 1 Kazakh. Yumi.
Say it, Yumi. Say it.
Do it.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm aggressively hunting through their HLTVs to see if I can justify this pick.
He's really trying to lean into it as much as he can, but he's got to be, precautious about it.
Well, I think the problem is like, look, I used to cover South American Counter-Strike a lot, and three or 4 years ago, I was like, Ataraxia, Reversive, Deco, actually kind of good prospects from the South American region. Other Argentine players that are kind of interesting. I don't think they played terribly, but they played a very solid game, and I thought there was room to grow. From what I can tell, they're not really growing. They're regressing, maybe even, and yeah, that's tough. So no, Crew are not the ones. I am picking KC Sports.
Everyone boo him in the comments.
Now I'm going to say, I don't think they have plugged up the gap of losing Snow at all. And I don't think they've really done a good job of making solid roster moves, even. I'm not very convinced by this team at all. But they are my last pick in the underdogs because I have no one else to pick. I'm not picking Boss. I'm not picking Crew. I'm just going to have to blind faith, hope that Urbano and Nizen show up in big ways for this team, because I want to believe that they're good enough. I think Urbano, especially, was somebody that I had as sort of like a kind of he was on my radar as, if he does have a breakout tournament, I think he actually could be good for another team. But I'm not convinced by Case. I'm not convinced by any of the underdogs left, but they're the best I got.
Damn, what an advert. And as someone who, myself, has never watched Kaze play and thought this is a team worth watching again, I can't really add much fuel to the fire of hope that might still burn in their chests, because, look, the best thing I can say about this team, as in, like, the most notable thing, something I can highlight for everyone is, oh yeah, these are the guys who are owned by that football player, Casemiro. And that's why it's called Kaze or Kaze, not Case. Like, that's it. That's all I can say. Like, yeah, that's a fun fact.
But he doesn't have the accent like he does on his name, so it is Case.
Exactly. Like, it's just, that's all I can say about this roster, because they are, to me, pretty much unknowns. Like, you're right, like, Urbano is a name that has occasionally pinged, like, my scouting, like, my very surface level, just data scouting. I've occasionally seen Urbano pop up and gone, oh, okay, opening numbers, cool, yeah.
Yeah, pretty explosive player type.
Yeah, something to do, but nowhere near enough to justify my full attention. So for me,
I'm a little weirdo. I know all these guys.
Yeah, you might know all of them by name, but I'm saying that for me, they're none of them that I've just gotten super attached to, got invested in. They're just guys who exist in Brazil. And if they're not playing my 9 AM EU games, and you're not very good, I'm not going to know you.
Guys who exist in Brazil. Can we make that a team? We should put a team together.
Guys who exist in Brazil.
I'd root for that to make through the major, I'll tell you what.
Some great branding right there. You're welcome, anyone who decides to steal that. But yeah, no, I don't have much to add on that point. So Tony, if you have more insight into some of these, I mean, some of these are deep cuts, so
please enlighten us.
Yes, is there anything saving this?
The Case team?
Yes, can you save them? Can they make it through? Preach.
Well, let's talk about BSD. Let's talk about the guy that they added most recently in the recency of RCF. I mean, he was a player who I thought was honestly really good. I thought he was actually hitting a pretty decent stride with that team. When he got benched, I was a little bit concerned because he was one of their highest performers, and then I think that in Brazil is something we've seen time and time again, is a highest performing opper somehow gets benched. Henny being probably case in point time and time again, for reasons that, maybe we don't know on a surface level, but BSD, he's joined this team. And when he started to play with them, he actually looked like an absolute beast. Like, he was blowing teams out the water straight up as an opper, where he was taking aggressive fights and being one out. He was playing up against these players and these teams like Crew, like Legacy, even here and there. Some wins over teams like Bestia and best of threes, where he was blowing them again out the water individually, but not consistent enough. Maybe he started to get a little bit figured out. Ultimate syndrome, where he came out and didn't really care who he was playing up against. And then after a time where they were like, all right, this guy's kind of giving us the works right now, we got to start to watch him, started to taper off a little bit. So I think that if he's going to show the level that he had when he joined, they have a shot of at least making themselves a close cut, maybe, to pulling through as that 7th spot. But, like, if we can't see BSD on top form while Urbano is playing his usual game and the calling from Riccioli is okay, it's going to be hard to say that they can take anything other than, like, Boss, Crew, Bestia, and then you have to say like maybe Red Canids if what I said goes, maybe Legacy, maybe Nouns, and maybe Wildcard. But that's like the whole thing. They would have to be like a hard 7th pick. You know what I mean? For those 7 spots. Anything other than that, there's not really a case I can make.
Right. Yeah, they have to be. It's essentially sounding like a miracle run. Just
It would have to be, yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing there to really.
An Alistair level
Yes.
life tournament.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
To be studied.
All of a sudden,
literally,
it's like a different man just has appeared on the server.
And everyone's like, "Oh, Alistair's so good! Oh,
I knew it. I believed all along." Shut up, you didn't.
yeah."
You did.
And then we're
You
gonna go,
did.
and then we're gonna go back to the next event, and it's gonna be like,
Yeah, well, that's the RMR. So
womp, 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 banana, banana, banana.
Yeah, it's fine. They'll beat FlyQuest. I know you're going to beat Drillers. You're going to smash them.
I hope so.
Somehow it's going to be the elimination game, and you'll knock them out. And everyone will go, yeah. Except those kids, but fuck those kids. All those Drillers fans can suck it. Right. Quite simply. Yeah. On to my final pick. Let's close this out with a favorite. Because I've just had a favorite lying in reserve.
You're gonna do it? You're gonna do it?
Of course, I'm not going to pick Crew as a favorite. I'm not insane. But I have some good choices here. I basically have 3 teams who you can make a case for each one of them. But I think I'm going to go with the one that's most recently been ruined, but could be very solid in MIBR. Because...
Ooh, I'm shocked.
It's a bit of a risk. Like, I really want to pick Imperial, but there's something about it that's just like, you're too attached to try. You're going to care too much if they lose. So pick MIBR instead. So I've picked MIBR. And look, MIBR on paper, you look at him, you go, Insani is on this roster. He's probably a legit tier 1 player just stuck in a tier 1.5 team. Like, you know, that sort of thing where you need him to be released into a top team, but there just isn't one for him to go into. But there's so much more to the roster if you actually watch their games. You know, Drop is a surprisingly solid piece who probably took a little too much shit for Furia's losses. Like, when he was on that roster, he was pretty good at playing bitch spots. He was a very impressive fragger. Safe has been, as a pair of hands, the namesake. Very safe. He hasn't dropped the ball a lot. He hasn't been a liability. He has been solid. And then Exit, for me, is just like a good rifle. The problem is now, when they've added Lukowski, it was supposed to be, you cut Breno, who is talented, but a kind of a mess in a lot of ways, and makes bad decisions, takes cheap deaths. Whenever you watch him, you're just like, you tend to have a couple rounds of map of, holy, euphoria, like he hit that shot, and then a lot of rounds of, holy, why did he take that fight? And that's been the problem with Breno. So they cut him, bring in Lukowski, and you think, cool, slam dunk. They're surely just an upgrade. And since then have been very up and down, and Katowice was just bad. So I'm sort of here betting on them to go and bounce back up again. The talent they have to deliver in the games that they're going to play here against relatively beatable competition. I expect a big bounce back, and MIBR to actually play up to their favourites tag, because they are super talented in all the right places. They just haven't put it together recently, and that's the only concern.
I think we're going to say the same thing here, Tony. I'm going to be honest.
Okay.
We're both kind of visibly like jolted. I'll let you go.
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, I want to give a little bit of context before I completely, what I feel like will be shit on your pick, because...
Go for it.
They wanted to pick up Lukowski for drop. That was the initial move they wanted to make.
That's what they wanted to do? This is context I don't have. They wanted to do that?
They wanted to pick up Lukowski for drop, and that would have made sense, role-wise. Then drop picked up IGL after they had a conversation when he brought it up to them, and it's not good. It's simply put, not good, and I don't want to be, like, too critical of drop, who very realistically could have just made a career-saving, like, you know, no, I'll pick up IGLing, it's all right, I'll do this, but, like, everyone is looking a step down. It looks like they're all uncomfortable now. It feels like everyone has taken a step to the side to where their individual level doesn't matter when they're playing in spots where they just look like they're in corners. And I'll let Yumi take what he wants to say on it as well. But all I'm going to say is that I feel as if at this point, if you're Insani, you've got to be saying to yourself, what is going on around me?
Yeah, I don't understand why. Okay, drop transitions to in-game leading, but then they also get rid of the sore spot in BR Enizan, who always looked uncomfortable even in exit system. Exit was still getting kills when he was calling. Drop was still doing a good job playing his bitch roles. Then you add Lucalzi, who, if you just add to the pack on T sides, sure he might lose some of his CT positions, but if you add him to the pack on T sides, you are just going to win a lot more rounds. And
Yeah.
I don't understand after they picked up Lucalzi why there wasn't a conversation going back like, hey, exit, you should call again. Like let's like what we were doing was working for a long time, and BR Design was kind of the bottleneck. Now we have Lucalzi, who is miles better, and we're still on drop calling. Like Insani doesn't look confident. He's supposed to be your fucking best player. He looked confident in every iteration of MIBR before this, and now he just looks so. It looks unnatural. Like
It looks so weird.
I just see his eyes, like I've seen the cameras. I see his eyes darting around in ways I've never even seen. I don't even know what he's looking at anymore. Like he used to be so locked in to fight all the time, and now he's just, I don't know. He feels clueless, or maybe it's just comms are cluttered. I don't know what's going on in this team, but I think Insani is quite literally flabbergasted about like the moves that have been happening around him. Because on paper, this team should fuck. But also safe, not a safe pair of hands. He was never really a big T-side contributor, but ever since Drop has taken over in-game leading, Safe is just like a contingency plan. Like they'll go for opening ideas on Anubis, for example, and Safe is just there with his AWP hiding like behind the two players at going for an aggressive peek, almost like he's hoping they fail. Like there is no setup for Safe. He is not locking out positions. He's playing behind his riflers. I don't know what the fuck is going on. This is like AWPing in-game leading styles of like rotations that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Wait, so you're telling me they changed the IGL ship entirely to drop, and that's just essentially fucked everything? Because I saw the last couple performances were mid, but I just thought embedding Lucalzi threw up more issues than we thought it would. It's not that deep. Entirely changing the IGL on a drop of a hat like that might be one of the least well thought out moves.
You know, I feel like maybe at the end of the day, Exit was kind of just like, yeah, dude, I don't want to fucking do this anymore. Like, do you think like he wanted a break? Like,
might be.
Gosh, get a break. He's thinking to himself, and he's like, wow, okay, this is what happens when I take a vacation from IGLing.
He's like, I'm actually a pretty good rifler. We should just pick up an in-game leader or something. And Drop's like, no, don't do that.
No.
Hold on.
Wait.
My spot's in trouble now.
That's exactly how I thought of it.
Guess what? We're buying the dip, lads. We're buying the dip. It's all good.
Sorry we crushed your pick.
I don't mind. I've got pretty much everyone I wanted, plus MIBR now. I'm okay with it. I'm still very happy to go up and just off faith in the raw talent on the roster.
Sure.
I'm very happy with that. So, yeah. Maybe by some miracle they'd have switched back. Let's just cross our fingers and just.
It's okay. They've now had like a month with Lucalzi. You know, maybe they've ironed out some of those creases. They actually could be good. I think that's the problem. They actually could be good, but everything we've seen so far has kind of indicated that they are.
It's a lot of blind faith here.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
They could, but we're going to do the traditional end of the show where we kind of touch on a couple big names that didn't get mentioned, and potentially the reasons why people chose to steer away from them. And it feels a bit weird to do this with favorites here, because we have essentially picked, by HLTV ranking, the 6 highest rated favorites.
Yeah.
But I'm going to essentially give you guys the opportunity to make a case for Imperial or 9Z, Tony, whichever one you want to start with, as to why you'd pick them over MIBR. Essentially, like, if we're just going favorites for favorites, sell me on one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think 100% right now I would have given the look in towards Imperial or 9Z over MIBR, just based on how they've been, getting their team ready for this RMR cycle in terms of making their moves at appropriate times. I think that the one move that they had to make, if they were going to, was going to be that AWP move if they were going to do anything at all, and they did. I think it's looked really good. Try, who came out of inactivity after what was like, I think, close to a year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Right. I have it in my notes here. Let me just pull it up really fast just so I can be accurate. Yeah, it was almost a full year of inactivity for Try, and he slots back in pretty seamlessly, dude. And if this is him at like starting level base power, I want to see that guy at his final form, because like if he continues to move forwards with this roster, where maybe they had interpersonal issues with Henny, perhaps, I don't know what the case was. If Try is better in that regard, individually speaking, he's about on par. He's about on par with what I can expect in terms of what he can put forwards. And I think that they look really good in the rifling department where they've got low pressure. All these players look like they're playing all these games out with not a whole lot on their shoulders in terms of, is this a bad move? Is this going to get me killed? Am I going to throw away the man advantage? They look like at every given point when they make their move, it's calculated enough to the point where they can make up for it on the other side of the map. There's always some level of protocol, even if somebody makes a little bit of a boneheaded play, it feels like, where they can maybe salvage a shitty situation. Can't really say that for MIBR right now. In what we were talking about, I feel like they don't have any of that in their wheelhouse yet. Maybe they will by the time the RMR rolls around with some practice with Lukowski a little bit more. But it's just not there. In terms of 9Z, though, I'll leave that to somebody else. But Imperial is the one I would have gone with.
Yeah, and I would have maybe wanted to even pick 9Z, but they've been on such a steep decline.
Really
I think
have,
because
yeah.
they've realized that their map pool is not as strong as they thought it was. They're getting mad exposed when they play these international tournaments, and they had that. I think the big reason we're so up on them at a certain point was they had that top 4 run at Dallas where they beat Vitality. I think in the at the end of their group. They beat Liquid, they beat Mouse in the best of 1 as well. So then they get G2 in the semifinals, and they just get. I mean, they don't get totally owned, but they do on the second map. And that was especially the map that they had made their hallmark, Dust 2, which has now deteriorated to like a. I looked at the stats earlier. It's like an 11% win rate recently. They're 1-9 in the recent officials on it, and that's when they've been trying to play some of these like EU cups while they're boot camping here. And I think it's just been such a big disappointment because this team I think does have a lot of merit. They play a very fun style. They're aggressive. They do these cute like crazy lurk plays. They freeze a lot so that people can make those types of plays. Max and DGT are usually the ones. And I think when that style works, it's so fun. And it makes the game so exciting. But now they're not even confident in the maps they used to first pick. I don't know where this team's direction goes, I think is the problem.
Yeah.
Because I think they have the talent and the style is unique, but it needed to. I think they probably need to invest in time in adding layers to it. And I don't think that's really come to fruition for them. I think even if they've tried it, it's not been successful.
And they still lack experience in their roster, which is kind of scary to me. They're all so young, like 20, 25, I think is their oldest player with like 3 21-year-olds or something close to it, where even their coach, no offense, isn't really the most seasoned in TGE. Like they had Bit for a while, but like I get scared as to when things aren't going their way and like start to like go down a little bit. Like who's going to be the one to, kind of give them a way forwards without them just having to make changes by virtue of no other options inside of the team. That worries me a little bit.
Yeah, for me, 9Z, I haven't been picking them recently. They've been actually available at a few events we've previewed. And I've been skipping over them for those reasons pretty much that Yumi brought up, that we've seen bad form. Maps just don't seem to be working for them. There's nothing they can just lean into. But for Me Imperial, the point I always like to talk about, because Try was a prospect of like 3-4 years ago, and that break he took after a variety of just bad projects, let's put it that way. Like,
yeah, it was Zero Nation that messed that guy up.
Poor dude.
Really did.
Poor dude.
Yeah, I mean, sure, he looks like his old picture made him straight up look like a serial killer because of the glasses. Like it was the glasses. When you see the picture, like you're just like, those glasses are not the ones. But
Ted Bundy glasses.
It's bad. And but for me, what was always fascinating about him is he had such a like easy to define style. Like I could really explain how he played with his AWP. He was going to be incredibly patient and smart about the angles he held and why he held them. He'd hit crazy flicks, and he was pistol whipping like crazy. This guy is the first to pull a pistol. Like as an AWPer, it's a last resort. You start getting overwhelmed, you panic, you whip out the Tech 9 or the P250. No, Troy might be the only player I've ever seen pull out a P250, then go hunting for kills, when he could have just used his AWP. And you're just like, yeah, he's a bit addicted to it. He goes to it very quickly. But he's just a fun player to watch because you're going to get these style elements just constantly thrown in, where he is who he is. He's very unique, very intelligent, and very fun to watch. So, yeah, Imperial's a team I do want to watch more of. It's just, when I look at these guys like Decent T, No Way, Phelps, they always feel like players that I think should be doing better. Like they always feel like, oh, this guy's got talent. This guy's got talent. Why does nothing ever manifest? And I feel like it's just there's not enough of a system maybe to set them up. Maybe Vinny's not the best caller, or maybe they're just not as good as the promise might indicate. That it's just the ceiling's not as high as we'd hoped.
I think what's so weird is that Imperial going into the Copenhagen major actually looked so much like better, like well rehearsed. They had good set pieces to open up the T-side rounds in particular. I think there was even an argument to be made that Vinny might have been the best caller in Brazil at one point. Just I guess shy of that Copenhagen major, and then they don't make it as or they make it through the RMRs into the main stage of the major, where they place top 14, top 16, past top 16. They got the extra slots alongside like Pain, and I think Legacy is up there as well if my memory serves. So they're just they're kind of on the rise with a lot of the other Brazilian teams, and I think them having a player like Henny actually did add a lot. I almost feel like they needed an aggressive AWPer, but I think after the Copenhagen major run, they dipped in form quite substantially, and I could see why Henny would want to leave. Like they seem like they're just breezing in their games, and they weren't good enough to just breeze through all their games. They were losing to teams that they definitely shouldn't lose to. Like I don't think they were trying so hard after the major, and I think it cost them one of their big stars on this roster, and I think it messed up the whole thing.
Right, so something about Henny's influence maybe helped the Riflers like figure out their roles in the world. Like
I think there's an intensity to Henny. I think there's also like
he's got aura, dude.
This is also one of like the heroes of Brazilian Counter-Strike to a certain degree. Like outside of the SK roster and Luminosity, Henny and that Immortals lineup were the next ones. Those were the guys that then carved the way to say there are more of us out there, not just SK Luminosity.
Yeah, I mean, he has one hell of a story. Let's put it that way. I mean,
yeah,
the 30 for 30 on Henny's career through CS would be absolutely amazing. Like that'd be, especially if you could find some probably not publicly available images, recordings of certain nights. I'm sure there's one hell of a documentary to make for the party boys of Brazil. Like that was an era of Counter-Strike. Let's put it that way. A certainly fun era.
Back in the day of the twins.
Yeah.
When you get to see Lucas and Henny in the same server, man. Simpler times.
Yeah, maybe not the listed game start time, but eventually on the server.
Yes. Good one. Reference.
But let's wrap it up there, because no offense to Boss and crew, I don't have too much faith in them doing a whole lot of anything here. Like Tony, do you see an outsider shot for Boss, or is it just
unfortunately I don't.
They're here and they're going home? Yeah.
I mean they just put out an HLTV post, no salaries, no sponsors, and no boot camp. Boss fight the odds at the RMR. Yeah, they're certainly doing that. I'm not going to be rude to them in the slightest. I think that they've got a lot of players that I frankly have a lot of respect for. I think that when I look at this roster and I see somebody like Cryptic, who's been putting up both calling and individuals in this scene where he doesn't have any leash, he doesn't have these kinds of players you can point to and say, go kill. And he's been making it work. And I respect that a lot. I think it really takes a lot of a player to be able to make it this far, even frankly, for him, as well as for Boss in its entirety, where they just picked up an NA advanced player and made the RMR. Like, that's kind of insane, to be completely honest with you. So as far as what they can do here, I might not have too much in terms of like hope for them, but as far as they've gone, I think you have to give them kudos no matter what, as to just getting to this point, getting to this level as the only organizationless team in the entirety of the RMR in America.
Yeah. I just didn't want to talk about water throwing Warden.
Oh yeah, dude, I forgot about that. He's got this weird kind of aura where I feel like he's either like the guy that you look at and you're like, oh dude, that guy's got to be like such a teddy bear. He's such a good looking guy. He's got to be one of like
chill.
And then he's throwing water at you and like screaming at you from across the rows, and you're like, okay, whoa.
Yeah, got a history.
Cool that Warden is back though. I am glad.
Yeah,
that Warden's back.
It's nice. It's nice to see some legacy behind some of these like up and comers, or even just the rosters in North America, because I always feel like we kind of lost that with Valorant.
Oh
And then,
yeah.
you know, certain players being banned and all sorts. So let's bring them all back. I'm happy for it.
Yeah, a very, very important figure in the story of 1.6, and even to a certain extent, Source. Like, he did play briefly in that game too. Oh, actually, more than a year now that I look it up. But no, yeah.
I unfortunately don't have anything on Crew though. So
yeah,
Ataraxia and Deco are good. That's all I've got.
Converted Def to North American, so.
Technically, yes. Crew is a team that, like, yeah, we made them a bit of a joke in the show because I don't think any of us have that much to really say for them. I hope them all the best. Good luck. If they can make an upset happen, that'd be huge for them, and it'd be certainly a story the following day. But
yeah,
none of us are willing to risk our pick on it. So that's going to be the show. But all right. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Leave a comment telling us why MIBR are actually the best team at this event, and that the two analysts who joined me are incorrect.
Idiots.
If you want to see more, be sure to leave a sub. Yeah, remember that members get extra content and the right to vote, so become a member, pay me, and special things happen to you. But all right, we'll see you in the next one, which hopefully for this show will be the opening stage of the major. And yeah, goodbye.